Turns out body modifications have been part of our cultures for a lot longer than we knew. These days our body modifications include things like tattoos, piercings, plastic surgery, and waist training. But back in the olden days and beyond, people were doing bizarre things to their bodies as well for cosmetic purposes and otherwise. I've compiled a list of some of those strange practices, so let's get to counting down our list of the top 10 ancient body modification practices you never knew about. At number 10, dental modification. When thinking about types of body modification, you might not always think of dental work falling under that category, because really, who just thinks about teeth on a daily basis other than dentists, right? No one is really thinking too hard about those bones in our mouths, but dental modification is a thing and has been for many, many years. Though nowadays we see modifications with braces, tooth gems, and the occasional grill, back in ancient times people were also modifying and decorating their pearly whites. For example, in the 7th century BC, Etruscan women would wear flat gold bands around their teeth as a way to both decorate and keep them in place. In Mesoamerica, some people would file their teeth using stone tools to carve their teeth into different shapes. They would also drill holes into their teeth and insert small stones and minerals like jade and iron pyrite into them. Vikings were also known to modify their teeth by carving horizontal grooves into them and sometimes filling the grooves with red dye as a way to make them look more fearsome. As if they needed to, right? I mean, they were Vikings. They were fearsome enough as it is. Though many of these practices have since been discontinued, so to speak, there are still people out there who we know would definitely try some of these ancient practices out. At number 9, foot binding. Foot binding was a body modification practice in China that began in the 10th century AD. This whole trend started because a court dancer bound her feet and the emperor at the time, Emperor Li Yu, liked what he saw. Soon this practice of foot binding became a huge trend, and it became associated with being able to find a husband. The practice of foot binding began when a girl was 5 or 6 years old. They would have her feet be in hot water, have her nails cut short, and have their skin rubbed with oil before having their 4 smallest toes broken, folded over, and tied down. Then their feet would be bent in the middle to break the arch, and the girl would have to walk around like that, over time crushing the heel and sole of the foot. After about 2 years, the foot would be considered ready, and depending on the size of the girl's foot by the end, this would judge how easily she would be able to be matched with a good husband. This practice continued all the way until the 20th century. Now before I carry on telling you guys about weird ways people modified their bodies, let me first ask you to leave a like on this video if you're liking what you see so far, and also maybe consider subscribing while you're at it, so come join the Bumblebee family. At number 8, Scarification. Scarification is the practice of cutting, burning, or slicing the skin to create raised scars that are seen as decorations on the body. The practice of scarification dates back quite a while, with the earliest evidence of this body modification dating back to 8000 BCE, where figurines of fertility goddesses were found with the appearance of scars along their bodies. Scarification could date back even further than that, but since skin is very rarely preserved, we may never know. Evidence of scarification have been found in cultures in Africa, as well as Australia, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, North, South, and Central America. Depending on the specific culture, there were a number of reasons behind the presence of scarification in their culture. Some people did it to show status or wealth, others did it for cosmetic purposes, others did it as a rite of passage, and some did it to show how well they could handle pain. In many cultures, scarification is still present, and honestly, I think it's pretty beautiful. At number 7, Trepanation. Trepanation is the process of drilling or scraping a hole into the human skull. Yeah, I know, it doesn't sound fun in the slightest, but back in the olden days, people did it, and it was a relatively common body modification for some reason. This practice was done in all sorts of cultures throughout different periods of time. During the Renaissance, trepanation was used to treat epilepsy and mental disorders, and this practice also dates as far back as the Paleolithic period. In ancient Peru, trepanation was done by using a ceremonial knife called a tumi. In ancient Greece, it was done using a drill. Polynesians used sharpened seashells, and in Europe, the procedure was done by using sharp flint or obsidian. Though we know that in the Renaissance, trepanation was considered a medical practice, in ancient times, the reason for this practice is still uncertain. It could have been used to try and fix damage from head trauma, but it's also believed that this practice was done to heal mental problems, release toxic spirits, or even as some kind of ritual. At number 6, neck stretching. In many cultures around the world, having a long neck is considered beautiful, and so many women practice neck stretching in order to attain this level of beauty. The practice of neck stretching is most commonly done by wearing metal rings around the neck, adding more and more rings over time. This practice was first seen in the 11th century in Southeast Asia. The theory behind the rings is that they're so thick that they push the head up, therefore stretching the neck, but in actuality, the lengthening of the neck is caused by the rings pushing down on the collarbones. The origin of this practice is unknown, but it is theorized that it began as a way of making women look more attractive in order to prevent getting captured as slaves. But on the other hand, some believe that this was a way of protecting people from getting attacked by tigers. Though this practice began so long ago, it is still a traditional body modification in some parts of the world. At number 5, self-mummification. The process of self-mummification is probably one of the most intense practices of body modification out there, not only because the process is so lengthy, but it also involves passing away at the end of it all. Self-mummification is done by people who practice Shingon Buddhism and is believed to be a way of ascending to a higher spiritual power and gaining immortality. The process of self-mummification is done over the course of 3,000 days. It involves a very strict dietary change, eliminating all cereals and instead being restricted to eating only nuts, tree bark, resin, pine needles, and berries. This diet reduces fat and moisture in the body to avoid bacteria breaking down the body after death. Some people who practice self-mummification also drink a tea that is made out of urushi, which makes the person throw up, but also acts as a kind of embalming fluid. Once the person's body is fully prepared, they are buried alive in a small chamber with an air hole, and they would chant and ring a bell to let people know that they're still alive. Once the bell stops ringing, the chamber is fully sealed, and 3 years later they're dug up and examined to see if they've been successfully mummified. If they have been, then their body is put on display and worshipped, and if the process was unsuccessful, then they're given an exorcism and reburied. At number 4, tattoos. As we all know, tattoos are still a very prominent part of our culture to this day, but this body modification also has a long history dating as far back as 3300 BCE. The earliest evidence of tattoos comes from Otzi the Iceman, a natural mummy who was found in the Alps who lived thousands of years ago and had a series of small dots and crosses tattooed along his lower spine, knee joints, and ankle joints. Researchers believe that this individual got these tattoos for medicinal reasons to relieve joint pain. In later years, tattoos were seen on more people, showing more intricate designs with different meanings. In ancient Peru, the process of tattooing was done by using cactus spines, dipping them into charcoal and pressing it into the skin. Even some Egyptian mummies showed evidence of tattoos on their bodies. So next time you ask your mom if you can have a tattoo and she says no, tell her about the history of this practice and maybe she'll reconsider. Maybe. At number 3, piercings. Much like tattoos, piercings are still very common in society. I mean, I have a few of them myself. They're in my face. Yeah, but again, much like tattoos, piercings also have a rich history to them. Otzi the Iceman, who I just mentioned, was not only found with tattoos, but he also had piercings as well. He's starting to sound a little too much like my Tinder matches, honestly. Otzi had pierced ears, which tells us that this body modification is just as old as tattoos. In the past, piercings were also seen amongst Olmec men in Mesoamerica, and they had plugs put into their cheeks, expanding them as they got bigger. Aztec men also had piercings sporting lip, nose, and earplugs, but in this society, your social status dictated what your piercings could be made from. The nobility wore piercings made from gold and precious stones, while lower classes of people had to wear bone. Victories in warfare also influenced someone's piercings, as they would be awarded bigger and bigger lip rings with every success. Even ancient Egyptians wore piercings. King Tut was found to have piercings, however belly button piercings were very exclusive and were reserved for the pharaoh, and anyone else who had one would be executed. At number 2, head shaping. The process of head shaping caused people in modern times to think that aliens were real. When remains were discovered with oddly shaped skulls, people really thought that we had proven the existence of extraterrestrials, but in reality it actually led to the discovery of an entire practice of human body modification. The process of head shaping involves putting some kind of pressure on a baby's head so that it grows into a different shape. This has been done using cloth or even boards in order to create the desired shape. The earliest evidence of modified skulls comes from Australia and dates back between 14,000 and 9,000 years ago. The skulls that were found had flattened foreheads and very prominent brow ridges. This practice also occurred in South America, where skulls with a variety of different shapes were also found. There were a number of different reasons for head shaping among different cultures. Some did it for aesthetics, others did it to protect spirits, but either way, it made for some very interesting looking people. And finally, at number 1, knife hand. Now this one is by far the craziest one in my opinion. So you know Captain Hook, right? He's got a hook for a hand. Well, this guy I'm gonna tell you about has Captain Hook beat by a landslide. A 6th century medieval burial was found in Italy, and it revealed a male warrior who had a knife for a hand. Yes, this man had a knife instead of a hand. This warrior had a hand amputation, however the reason for said amputation is unknown. In place of the lost hand, the prosthesis was a blade. Now I don't know if this guy lost his hand in battle or something, and the best that they could do was give him a knife as a placeholder, or if he willingly chopped off his hand so that he could have that knife hand, but either way, that is so bad. badass, and I would have loved to see this guy in battle. Now before I wrap things up for today, I want you guys to tell me down below which body modification from this list was the most shocking to you. I think the knife hand thing was by far the most bizarre, but how about you guys? Let me know down in the comments. Anyways, that's it for me. I've been your host, Brew Room, and until next time, stay safe, make good choices, and stay sweet, bumblebees.